today we are going to be focusing on clinician-driven innovation and how clinicians can lead and support the innovation process and the resources that are available to support them. Innovation can be a bit of a buzzword. It can be really vague. What does it mean? What does it mean specifically at Lurie? How can I participate in it? What does the process look like? What are the resources? Those are often questions we get when people are kind of new to this process. And so we're hoping to kind of tap into the brains of our amazing panel here to learn about what innovation means here at Lurie and how you can get involved. Our goal today is to walk away with clinicians feeling inspired to participate in innovation and feel like educated if they do want to get involved. Somebody's very excited. I'll do a quick introduction of myself. My name is Erica Isaacs. I am part of our innovation team here at Lurie. I am not a clinician by training. My background's actually in biomedical engineering and user research, but I've been working in medical device innovation for over 10 years, and my role was primarily as a user researcher. So my job was to be the bridge between end users, be it patients or clinicians, and then the designers and engineers that are making devices. And my job was to advocate and make sure that whatever decision was made around product development, it was grounded in a clinician's perspective or in a patient's perspective. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to kind of get the perspectives of our panel today. Before we jump in, I want to learn a little bit more about our audience, both in the room and virtually. So if you guys will engage me or indulge me in some audience participation, if you can scan this QR code here, or if you're joining in the Zoom, there's a link that you can click. And there's a couple questions in there. We want to know who's in the room with us. Are you a clinician, a nurse, a physician, advanced practice provider? Are you external? Maybe you're a student or an industry person. We want to know who we're talking with today. And then the second question on there is, have you been involved in an innovation project? Yes, no, maybe. And if the answer is maybe and you're not sure, part of what we're hoping to do here is to help you answer that question. And the answer is probably yes. So take a few seconds to fill that out, and I'll take a look at the results. You'll also be able to put up your questions here. So if you click through that survey, at the end, there's going to be an opportunity to enter questions. So if you have questions throughout our panel today, feel free to enter them there, and we'll try to get to them at the end. If you're here in the room, you can also do the good old-fashioned raise your hand. That still is acceptable. All right. Looks like results are still coming in, but we have a good mix. We got a lot of healthcare administrators or research administrators here today, which is great because I think people don't recognize that how important it is for administration plays a huge role in the innovation process. While clinicians might have the ideas and the expertise, the administrators are often behind the scenes helping them execute. So I'm really glad we have their participation today. And have you participated in an innovation project? This is impressive. 75% have said yes. That's really cool. So hopefully we can maybe hear a little bit more about your guys' experience. And then there's about 16% that says, I'm not sure. So hopefully we can answer that question at the end of this and make you guys feel more confident. So great, let's dive in. I'll give kind of quick intros to each of our participants, and then I want them to dive in a bit more. We'll start with you, Dr. Malakuti. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're both a clinician and a professor and a practitioner of innovation. You actually taught me of the innovation process back in grad school, and I won't say how long ago that was for both of our sakes. But he was my professor at Northwestern, and he led us through a multidisciplinary class where there was engineers, clinicians, lawyers, business people, all working to bring a medical device to fruition, and that was a really formative experience. And I would love to hear more about kind of your current role and how innovation still shows up in your work today.
Thanks for all. Well, first, thanks everyone for being here.
Marcelo, you might need the mic. You might have to click it on.
Let's talk about innovation with a microphone. Anyway, thanks all for being here. I'm going to try to be as casual as possible because it's been a long day. I'm not usually a fan of sitting in an audience for panels because I get kind of bored. So I'm going to try to be, if we're getting bored, just raise your hand or something. What was oh yeah. So I obviously here to talk about innovation. I'll get into that in a moment. But I started off my career here. I'm an intensivist, so I work in the intensive care unit. And I used to be the medical director of the ICU here with my colleague, Dr. Source. And then I became the associate chief medical officer for the hospital. And now I'm the chief medical officer for the hospital over the past, I think, about 4 years or so, starting to lose count. So my role basically is responsible for overseeing all of our medical staff. We have about nearly 2,000 medical staff, and which includes physicians, APPs, dentists, and allied health. I oversee our quality and safety center, first Center for Quality and Safety, risk management, a lot of case management stuff, and obviously our medical operations for physicians. Part of what I did in the ICU was I started an innovation program called Ignite. That's probably what I'm here to talk about, and I can talk about that later if you'd like. But the crux of it is that we relied on cross-pollination. We weren't so much focused on device creation or anything like that. We really wanted to harness what's happening at the bedside from the people that are at the bedside and see if we can help them harness some of the stuff that they're coming up with. Otherwise, you don't really know what they're doing. I will say that I am personally and perhaps selfishly involved in that because I used to have a business before medicine, and we really relied on leveraging outside experts. And I very quickly realized that in medicine, that I'm sure Lauren will attest to, we all kind of think along the same lines. So no matter what jobs everyone has here and what industry you're in, I would probably submit that you probably think somewhat similarly and you're cut from the same cloth as everyone else. And in this business, we were able to generate a lot more value by asking outside of our walls how people would solve solutions and bring people in. So that was the crux of Ignite, and I can get into that a little bit later. But that's me. I think that's all you want.
That's great.
Okay.
Yes, next, Dr. Source, you have spent many years at the bedside, primarily in the PICU, but you've recently stepped into a new role as a Senior Director of Nursing Research and Operations. Can you tell us a little bit more about your new role, your goals, and how you support nurses in research and innovation?
Sure. So I've been in this role for about a year now, probably a year now. And it's the first time that there is a nurse who's split between the Department of Nursing and the Research Institute in the many decades that I've worked here. So it's a really exciting time, I think, for both the hospital and the Research Institute. And it's not that nurses haven't been a part of the Research Institute in the past, but this is a much more formal leadership position. So it's very exciting. So my job is to advance research within the Department of Nursing and Allied Health. And currently, the research nurses in the institution are part of my structure, some of them, not all, that's coming. And our clinical research unit is under my leadership as well, which is really super exciting because they're a brilliant group of nurses who do amazing work every day. My goals are to really enhance the culture of research here within the Department of Nursing, to do more of what is done here every day. The contributions of nursing and allied health to research studies across the institution is contributions to over more than 1,000 studies. And so when you think about research from that perspective, we can't do it without one another. And so it really is about bringing the nurses into the fold and the rest of allied health to understand more and better and be, let's just say, happier about it. What else did you ask me?
How you support nurses in research and innovation, which I think you've answered fairly well.
Great, perfect.
Great. Okay, last but certainly not least is Jay Hamilton. You are a nurse and you've spent a decade at the bedside, but you are now at Medline, working at a company that many people in this room probably are very familiar with, have used their devices. Tell us about your role at Medline and how you work with clinicians to develop new solutions at the bedside.
Yeah, I'm nowhere near as impressive as these two, so this can be a lot faster for me. Jay Hamilton, I'm the Director of Sales for Advanced Wound Care. So I lead a team of clinicians and non-clinicians going throughout the nation, presenting technologies, evaluating technologies, and at times doing troubleshooting with technologies. So I have a lot of experience with getting end user feedback, good, bad, and ugly, and that's exactly what we should be getting. Outside the standard day-to-day, I've been lucky enough to get my name on a few patents, be a part of a lot of advisory boards, and even pretty in-depth as it comes to quality improvement initiatives and overall higher levels of research studies. So I have a very different perspective, but one that I'm stoked to be sharing with y'all. So thank you for letting me come.
Fantastic. Yes. Of course.
You get to only keep those if they stay in Illinois.
I actually do. This is exactly why we're here. I have an uncle that actually has a steak restaurant in Hammond, Indiana. So I'm very torn right now. I want the Bears to be the Chicago Bears, but I also want my uncle to do okay. So I'm of two worlds.
Well, we have a great set of panelists here, and as Jay pointed out, kind of unique perspectives, and that was our goal, to look at clinicians' perspectives, industry perspectives, and how we can collaborate together. Panelists, this is very much meant to be a collaborative discussion, so please jump in. If I ask a question of one person, but you have thoughts, please feel free to add additional questions. So to jump in, Dr. Source, Lauren, when we first met to talk about this panel, you mentioned something that I think really got at the heart of the conversation we were trying to have today. And you said that nurses at the bedside are constantly wondering, why can't this be better? And in my experience, working as a user researcher, I think nurses are constantly innovating because they're constantly developing workarounds to devices or workflows that aren't optimal for their patient care. So I'm curious if you could share, one or two, pain points that you or your colleagues have identified in everyday care, and explain why those observations are really a valuable starting point for innovation.
Sure, and I'll share the example with the group here that I shared with you, Erica. And working in an intensive care unit, patients receive many, many, many IV infusions. It's very unusual to have a patient who has a single IV line. And as both of you probably know, I mean, at the beginning of the day, there is what we commonly refer to as the spaghetti of the IV lines, because every IV line looks exactly the same, with the exception of one that I don't even know if we use nitrite anymore. But so all the IV tubing looks the same, and so it's the nurse's job to ensure that the medicine in the bag matches what's on the pump, which is going to the right place on the patient. Because if you put the wrong fluid in the wrong place, there's going to be a big problem and an untoward outcome. And so it's always this, it doesn't matter how hard you try, the tubing is always getting mixed up, and God forbid you have to take your patient to MRI and you have to change out everything anyway because you need like 30 feet of IDV tubing because the pumps don't go into the MRI. Hashtag, we need MRI friendly pumps to anybody who's interested in creating that. But anyway, and so I said, every day you spend your 30 minutes of your morning untangling all the IV tubing to try to ensure that you're keeping your patients safe. And wouldn't it be great if we had one of two things: a device that held them stable no matter what and divided them so you very clearly, or color-coded IV tubing. So you always knew that the blue tubing was something that was related to X medicine, and the red tubing was always your epi, and the yellow tubing was always your Lasix. And wouldn't that be great if we had some sort of color coding system, so at a glance, nurses could be like, oh, that's the blue tubing, that's my dopamine, or my whatever. And so I did learn from our conversation that a nurse did innovate a product, and Katie shared the website with me. But that's exactly what happens every day. So the nurses currently write little labels and put the little labels on the IV tubing to tell you at the point of entry what it is that's infusing. So you don't have to trace it all the way back up to the pump and up to the bag. So that was the example that I shared.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic example, and something that might come out of this conversation is the difference between like incremental innovation and disruptive innovation. So somebody might not think an MRI friendly pump is really that exciting, but like that can have a huge impact on patient care. It can save time. So there's
money,
money,
lots of money,
which is what people like to hear sometimes. And I think that's maybe a disconnect between clinicians and industry sometimes, is the clinician is like, this is important to my patient, and industry is like, well, is it going to make money, and how do we kind of combine those two things? So yeah, fantastic example. Marcelo, I guess, like, do you see kind of a similar pattern in other clinician roles, and have they identified kind of like similar pain points?
Yes, I would say yes. I mean, how many people here, see, these are the questions I hate to ask. How many people here, when you first started your careers, you were like energized and had a lot of ideas to bring, and then perhaps over time you got a bit saturated and said, well, I'm not going to keep trying to harness this because this isn't a system that's going to support it, or I'm just going to come in, clock out, and do my job. Everyone's nodding. Maybe there's outliers. Okay. I am that way too. And the reason I say that is because when you come in with a fresh mind, especially at the bedside from the physician standpoint and the APP standpoint, you come in with learning and trainings that you had, but undoubtedly you're looking at your patient and thinking of better ways to do something. So it's interesting because we have an influx of physicians when they first start, especially out of their training, that have incredible ideas. And I hear it when I'm on rounds and I say, wow, how fresh that they're doing that. They have the energy to do that. But the point is those ideas are there, and we get a lot of them, and we have to figure out which ones, to your point about cost, that the return, non-financial, justifies the cost. And so we have had physicians here who have generated an innovative idea, most of them not disruptive, because if you look at the matrix, disruptive is on the right upper quadrant for cost and return. And most things in healthcare, it's hard to develop a disruptive product. So they're really doing these incremental innovations that are easier to stand up, and that permeate throughout the medical center to the bedside. What we want to do is encourage the physicians to come forward with their ideas. The flip side of it is that, we hear about all these unicorns, right? So sure, Akash talks about it all the time, right? You hear about that one person who came up with that one drug, when they were practicing after 10 years and now has a place in the Hamptons and isn't working anymore. But those are those disruptive innovations that have taken 10 years to go through the FDA, has had so many iterations, has cost millions of dollars. You can have a similar impact, not just locally, but out extramurally, that is not going to cost a lot if it's an idea that hasn't been done before. This labeling the IV tubes is brilliant because the return for patient safety, you cannot put a price on it. It's probably going to cost some money. So long story short is we do encourage that incremental innovation. And I feel like when people think, oh, how am I ever going to develop a disruptive product that's going to be a 9-8-figure product, they're going to shy away from it because they think it's unattainable.
You mentioned that when people are kind of first starting off the careers, they have this fresh perspective. They come with a lot of ideas. Like if a nurse or a clinician has an idea, they have either I've identified a problem and they want to do something about it, or they have an idea. What should they do? Like, what are the resources here at Lurie to support them?
Call Kosh. I'll give you an example of something. So there was, I was rounding in the cardiac unit, and I went up to, if you've been in our inpatient areas, there's like, we call it the porch. So usually the nurse will sit outside with their computer if they're not, taking care of the patient inside. And this particular nurse had a long kind of like rope thing tied to her foot, and she was sitting outside the chair, and I just saw her kind of like going like this back and forth. I was like, what are you doing? And I looked inside, and it was this really, really long, it was a trach tie. So if a kid has a tracheostomy, you put this kind of thread around it to secure it on the neck, and it's kind of thick. It's kind of like 4 times the size of a shoelace. And they're very long, and she had it attached to the crib of the kid, and she was rocking the kid to like put them to, because they're like crying on rounds. And it was the smallest idea that obviously is probably a patient safety issue, but we actually looked it up, and there was nothing on the market that did something where the clinician could rock the baby to sleep without having some, $20,000 crib that's motorized that's going to do it itself. So it's just those small ideas that cost $0 that, what do you think happened? Everybody was using it in the unit, and then it went to other floors because the word spread fast. So basic idea, yes. Is it life-changing? No. But these are the things that we can develop and then ask, how are you going to harvest it? And the way that it got broadened was simply going to her leadership and I was helping a little bit too. And we found a way that other areas could start to use something that was a little bit safer. So you don't have to go to the Kashas of the world, although they will. You can just, and sorry to target you, Kash, but you're the guy. But you can just go to your leadership, and there are ways that we can kind of harness stuff. And I have tons of stories like that. I mean, it continues to happen. The saying that I always say is the crucible of innovation is at the bedside. It can be at the bench and it can be at the bedside. But that's where things really get harnessed. If you're not thinking in that lens of how you can improve patient care, then there's no innovation.
I think one of the important things to highlight in this particular example, Marcelo, is that in creating this, it freed up the nurse to be able to attend to other important things at the same time. So I can rock my patient and I could do my documentation. So it is a way to create efficiencies and meet the patient needs at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and improve care, right? So like a nurse can prioritize and give their attention to the thing that needs the attention the most. I'm curious, Jay, like obviously there's identifying the needs at the bedside. How, from the industry perspective, do you engage with clinicians or hospitals to understand like where should Medline innovate? Like where's the next thing that you guys should focus on?
Yeah, so to start off with, my original spot was trauma and ER. So I didn't know that we weren't supposed to untangle the lines until I went up to the ICU. I thought that that's how they're supposed to look. So your innovation would have been great for me. So I will say that there's really two ways that you can give predominant feedback outside of some formal ways that I'm sure we'll talk through in a little bit. First and foremost, during a trial or an evaluation process, this is your way of getting incremental feedback based on specific lines within a category. So just about any time that there's going to be a sensitive technology, there will be a small amount of units that trial a product for a limited period of time to see if it's at least clinically equivalent to the incumbent. And you may say that that is good enough. And that's fine. Sometimes that there's a good justification for good enough. It's a financial savings. It's a better for a process flow. It's maybe better integration into different systems. But what industry does here at those times is the category is now secure. The category is meeting your needs. So as we talk through IV tubing, if somebody is trialing a new set of IV tubing and they say it's good, even though it gets tangled up, it's not wrong of you to evaluate that and say, this is good enough for what this is. But once it's implemented, that's where the conversation really starts into innovation, especially in disruptive innovation. I can't tell you how many times we bring customers back that we have worked with for years, if not decades, on certain categories, and we go, how's it going? And they go, it's pretty good. We just had a few challenges, but nothing out of the sorts. And then we go through a little bit deeper. I'll give you an example. So we were working with this large national healthcare system. They utilize these prophylactic and foam-based dressings that have silicone all over the face of the dressing. And they say they work out really well on wounds and they work out really well on strong, intact skin and everything else in between. It's fine. And that was a pause. Like, what do you mean it's fine? Number 1 and 2 sound like you're really stoked about it. Number 3, I'm a little bit concerned about. They said, well, the silicone adheres pretty well, which is what we want to do for intact skin. And then when it's on a wound, it absorbs fluid pretty well. But if somebody has a deep tissue pressure injury or we have any sort of maceration or denuded skin, whenever we pull it off, there is a little bit of stripping within that space. And we're pretty concerned about that. But what are you going to do? We can do things. You can make a technology that has a lower level of silicone adhesion within certain arenas. You can offer a technology that does not have silicone on the face and just talking through a border. What I would hope that everybody takes away from this is that, yes, you should absolutely evaluate products in a challenging way, and that should be your space for trying to find out if there's incremental changes. But those disruptive technologies or even incremental technologies in a category can absolutely come from long-standing partnerships as long as you are consistently telling your supplier, this is what is working and this is what's not, and it's within that niche category. We have an opportunity within here.
Great. So you mentioned there's kind of those opportunities when you talk to the supplier. I think there is maybe a level of like intimidation or uncertainty, like how best to engage with industry when you're a clinician. I'm curious from all of your perspectives. We'll start with Jay. Like, what are some best practices when you have an idea or you have an unmet need or a problem? Like, what are some best practices for engaging, and when should a clinician engage with you?
industry is far more afraid of you than you are of it. So first and foremost, I'll say how not to engage. Please, if you have a really good idea, whether it's incremental or a disruptive challenge, do not bring that idea to your rep. I say this because I've had a lot of people come up to me in a very collaborative and beautiful nature and say, hey, I know that you're working on this. You know what would be really good? And I stop them and I go, whatever you're about to say is yours. And once you say it out loud, it starts to become murky on whose it is. And that's not fair to you, and it's probably not fair to your idea. I think it's easy to talk through metaphors. So the way I say it, if you were at a restaurant that you like, good restaurant, and you are a cook, you wouldn't tell the server, hey, you know what's a really good recipe that you guys should think about? Because 9 times out of 10, the server is going to be polite and drop that and never tell a chef. Or, gosh forbid, 1 time out of 10, they're going to take your idea and never credit you for it. So please, never bring a really good idea directly to a rep. However, there are official partnership pathways that you can bring your idea to that both protects you, protects your institution, but also reinforces that it can go through the right pathway. I get the pleasure of working around the nation. I do not get the pleasure of working with innovation groups very often, so please bring it to this group. Secondly, there are normally advisory boards within for-profit organizations. They're always happy to take on the voice of a customer, and normally those follow very specific protections over your IP and over their liabilities within those spaces. And if you do fall in the realm that you say, I just want to give my ideas out, and I just want to be heard, but I don't want to be part of the rest of this pathway, there are normally third-party groups, it sounds like we've maybe worked with them before, that will always pay for subject matter experts' time in specific categories to be able to ask and answer questions with you. So I ask to you, follow official pathways. Do not take the easy route to give out your idea, because that is all you're doing. You're giving out your idea. Is most likely, it will never be a credit to you, unfortunately. And most likely it's going to be bastardized to the point that you either don't see it come to fruition or you don't see it realized in the way that you were thinking of.
I'm curious, Marcelo and Lauren, like how have you had the opportunity to engage with companies on innovation projects, and what has that experience been like and lessons learned?
Yes. So when I was in the PICU and had this like fountain of ideas, one of them, so if you're ever, so a lot of the ICU time we do procedures at the bedside. So we have to bring it's basically like creating your own OR in a patient room, and it's not equipped to do that. So there's a giant clunky cart and you bring it in and it has all of the equipment in there. It has your needles, your forceps, your tubes, all the stuff. It has the gowns, et cetera. And, you know, you pretty much have to do it urgently when it happens. So you're bringing this thing in and all the supplies are in there. And sometimes you bring out the wrong size. Sometimes you bring out something that you don't need. Sometimes you bring out extras that get legs and find their way elsewhere. And what we were finding is that we were just completely wasting our inventory and had no idea what was in these carts and what we were taking out, what we were taking out. So I used to be part of this healthcare incubator called Matter. Some of you may know about it, of course. And we were an official partner with them at Lurie, and they basically put you in the watering hole of a lot of healthcare startups that, you know, might be flirting with angel investors. And I met one of the CEOs, and she had a background in healthcare, had a child that was treated here. That's usually what happens, by the way, if someone has a connection to your organization. They really want to work with you gratis. So I told her, you know, we need to find some type of electronic way to track all of these equipment and supplies. And after several months of her shadowing and immersing in our work, we developed an app together that was near commercialization. I totally respect what you're saying. We never did an NDA, probably should have, but they didn't take it or do anything, you know, Machiavellian. But we did create this app that we had on a tablet and on smartphones for all of our providers in the ICU, so they would select what they wanted. And we would say, you know, if you're going to put a central line in a 5-month-old, this is the equipment you need and nothing else. So it saved us a lot of money. It reduced a lot of waste. It improved our efficiency at the bedside. We would not have been able to do that if I didn't engage with them. Another is that in Ignite, I ran what we called think tanks. So I would bring in people from all of these different industries outside of the walls of Lurie and ask them who have never touched a patient in their life, how can we solve this medical problem? Because it goes back to what I was saying, we all think the same way. And so, there'd be 20 providers in a room trying to figure out how to solve this problem with we over transfuse patients with blood. Just today on NPR, they said we're in a great shortage of blood. So we really want to conserve what we were doing. But I brought in people from the MCA across the street and Uber and Matter and logistics and especially Google. And I say especially Google because they didn't help with that one, but they helped with another one where the thought was, how can we improve the experience of a patient who's in the ICU for a month at a time? It's this 8-year-old who used to be on a playground playing. So we developed a virtual reality program that nobody else had in the country, and we published 3 papers out of it. We only would have done that if we had engaged Google. So we collaborated with a giant conglomerate, as you can imagine. There was no profit sharing. We didn't commercialize it. They gave us all the supplies for virtual reality for free and support. So there are ways to engage with startups who are really hungry to work in the healthcare space. They really are. Or non-startups, Fortune 500 companies that just want to help anyone in healthcare, even if you're not a clinician. So they're out there.
So I'm currently working with a group with some of the people in this room to run a study on a device with a startup company. And it has been incredibly interesting to be able to meet with the CEO and the major engineers that are working on this product to be like, what? I mean, a lot of what they're doing, I don't understand at all because I'm not an engineer and I'm not doing device development, but they have no clue about what we do here. And so it is a more of a much more natural marriage. And I had the opportunity to meet with them when they were here in person. And we were having this very interesting conversation. And the CEO said to me, he goes, we meet with physician groups and they tell us, oh, this problem happens all the time. The nurses never, blah, 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 whatever it was. And then he said, and then we go meet and that the physicians would say, yeah, that's a miscarriage of their due diligence. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then they said, then we go meet with the nursing groups and they're like, this happens all the time. And these are the reasons why it happens. And so to your point, everybody thinks the same. Well, maybe not in certain cases, or about problems and how to handle them. And so I'm like, yeah, that's why you can't, when you're working on whatever your product is, you need more than one person or one type of professional to provide you with that sort of insight into how the problem can potentially be resolved. I mean, we've got our innovation team here and our CTIP team here that's working. I didn't initiate this contact. So all that, NDA, intellectual property, that's already taken care of before it even got to me, which is great. But it's been a very interesting project, and we're going to do their pilot study in the ICU. So it will be, I think, rewarding on both ends with the hope that we'll be able to follow, if their device does what they think it's going to do, we'll be able to follow this through to a full-scale multi-center trial, which to me is super exciting. # yay.
I agree. Yay, for sure. But I think that's a great point that, sorry, go ahead, Jay.
I'm sorry to interrupt here. Just one point to piggyback on that. We hear all the time, this category or this product fails like this a lot. And then we look back through our own quality reporting and we don't see it. So it kind of maybe was told to one person that put it in a desk and didn't put it away. For frontline staff, I highly suggest that you normalize doing quality reporting. It is not just for the big bad, oh my gosh, we're getting into very significant concerns. If a product does not work the way that you are expecting it to, and you know that it is intended that way, the best way to get critical mass for a vendor and or an industry to take you seriously is through quality reporting. As a reminder, all quality reports still have to be reported to the FDA, which does become part of a public database called a MAUDE report, which every vendor hates if you know about. So I highly suggest if you want your voice heard, especially in that critical mass sort of route, take a little bit of time. I know it's annoying as heck, but look into those quality reports. Sorry, Rob.
I think it was a great point that each of you brought up, was that this is kind of a cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary practice, right? Like, you don't have to carry a product all the way through. There are people that are experts in regulatory, contracts, legal, IP. And so I think that's hopefully one of the takeaways from this conversation is you don't have to do it alone. And if you don't know where to start, that's okay. There's resources here at Lurie. We have external experts that we work with all the time. And so it's a team effort, it's a team sport to bring something to fruition. And there's lots of opportunities to collaborate. I think we've touched on this a little bit in a couple different ways, but I want to call out that innovation isn't always about coming up with the idea. There are many clinicians that really want to improve care, but they don't want to be a startup founder. They don't want to take a device all the way to market. So I'm curious, from your guys' perspectives, what are some other ways clinicians can get involved in innovation and throughout the product development process that doesn't require them being a founder?
I will highlight, outside of those points I already talked through, advisory boards and maybe even third-party kind of consortiums. One of the best ways, and people don't really talk about, is joining non-for-profit groups. Quite often, like I've worked with groups, the Emergency Nursing Association, the American Association of Critical Care Nurses, the National Pressure Injury Advisory Panel, just trying to prove to you that I can say long names very fast. But eventually, industry looks at these groups as, wow, what a coalition of subject matter experts into one right now. Can we go to them and have them look at innovative technology, again, put the appropriate protections around them, and then come back to them with some thoughts. So if it is something that you're interested in, you want to find it a little bit more of an organic way. Professional non-for-profit organizations are a great way of getting your feet wet there.
Okay, so I need to acknowledge that I know I put my color-coded IV tubing out there in the ether, so who does it belong to? I don't care. If it gets done, for me, if it gets done and it enhances patient safety, that's all the credit I need. It doesn't have to do with me, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to say MRI safe IV infusion pumps, for sure. I needed to say that. So more locally here at Lurie, we have just started actually this month, in fact, yesterday, we initiated our first drop-in sessions for anybody who has an idea, needs some help to do something. And it all sort of started around the Department of Nursing goals of how do we link mentors with people who want to do projects, whether it's EBP, innovation, research, whatever. And so it's open essentially to anybody, and it's alternating months, the second Tuesday of the month from 8 to 10. And then on the other month, it's 2 to 4. And it literally is just open, come on in, where people have joined people joined on Tuesday, both in person and online, where they can sort of bring their ideas and say what they need help with. And so eye to eye, you'll be very happy that I spent some time going through the website, what's available, how to bring your idea, what's the thing. As a nurse, reach out to Kelly. She will help you. Reach out to others that are listed on the website. We have a Nursing Innovation Council, which is an amalgamation of policy, procedure, practice, and research that people can tap into our SharePoint site for conversations there. And one of the pieces I didn't talk about as part of my job still is I'm still part of the faculty in Peds Critical Care, and I oversee all of our clinical research. And we have a monthly Think Lab where people come and present whatever their projects are so that people could think about it. And it can be like, look, I have this idea, scratching at the back of my head. How could we do this? People haven't brought any innovation yet. It was initially designed around research. What's your research idea? What's your study? If you're having trouble figuring out how to measure it, bring it. We can talk about it. But we've opened it up to whatever the project is. And so at our most recent Think Lab, we had 2 studies that were presented. And so we have these opportunities for people to come and talk. And even though it's the Think Lab in the PICU, We've invited colleagues from the different services. Kelly, I think you're on the invite list too for that. And so people can come and talk about their research or whatever their project is. So there's plenty of opportunities. And I think that one of the challenges is people don't necessarily know all those opportunities. And so we're doing our best to try and get that out there. And in fact, the appointments for the drop-in sessions went to every nurse's Outlook calendar. So every nurse or APP in the institution have that on their calendar right now. So it was our way to advertise in a big blast way.
First of all, it's been 45 minutes. Is everyone okay? So when I first came here, I thought we were like the only hospital in town. And what's really unique about the city that we are in is that we have the highest concentration of healthcare entities than pretty much anywhere in the country within like a 5-mile radius. And I say that because you can imagine if all this innovation is kind of brewing here that we're probably not even recognizing, take that incrementally to all the other areas around us, you can only imagine how much is there. So because of that, it's no surprise that we have a lot of incubators in the city. So Matter is one of them, and you can look on Matter's website and get involved. It's very easy. They have like mentorship and house programs. They have people who just bring an idea that's not even a seedling, and they help mentor them to help cultivate that product idea, et cetera. And it's a non-for-profit. The M Hub, has anyone heard of M Hub? That's another one in the city that's really, really great. They're a little bit more on the engineering side, but they have workspaces and whiteboards, and they love for people to come by. And then the Northwestern plug is the Garage. The Garage is great, and I know Erica was involved in that. It's for, and I'm pretty sure when we spoke to the Garage years ago, anyone from really Lurie could also use it. You don't have to be part of the Northwestern ecosystem because there are faculty who are part of it. So if you have a faculty member, they can kind of be your bridge for it. I bring this up because there are a lot of opportunities in the city for us to harness innovation. And then if you want to be immersed in innovation in a different way, I highly suggest looking into Ideas Week. That's from the Chicago Innovation, what's it called? Chicago Innovation Symposium. Yes, it's every year. It's kind of like in the fall. It's a whole week-long thing. You probably see like banners and signage all over. But Ideas Week is incredible. They have speakers from all over the country. It's all obviously focused on innovation. There's a healthcare concentration as well. You get to rub elbows with people from all of the different walks of life. They're in innovation. You learn a lot, network a lot. So I highly recommend looking into that too. So it doesn't, again, have to be within the walls of Lurie. You can go out, harness your idea, and then bring it back in. And the last thing I will say is one of the biggest killers of innovation at the bedside or anywhere within the hospital system are barriers to actually making it work. So we need to reduce the amount of red tape. We need to make it super accessible. We need to foster innovation and not say no right away. And those are the ecosystems that really harness and cultivate good innovation. So we need to be sure that that is not happening here. And Lurie does a really good job of making it as facile as possible.
Great, I totally agree. I think Chicago has a very unique innovation ecosystem that you can tap into, and I think Lurie takes advantage of it. There's Northwestern, there's Matter, there's M Hub, so there's ways to learn about and engage in innovation internally and externally. And Marcelo, you brought up a good point. There is kind of many different valleys of death, as we call them in innovation, where a really good idea can kind of fall off and doesn't move forward. And I think one of them is kind of that last mile of adoption. So you might pilot something, but then that kind of, it stops there. So what role do kind of clinical champions or operational leaders play in supporting the adoption of new technology to kind of get past those last hurdles?
Yes and no. So I think that our youngest generations are really interested in advancing and adopting new technologies. Just from a personal experience this weekend, my son's phone died, dead, never to be resurrected, supposedly. And so he was without a phone from Friday night until like yesterday at, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So how does a 20-year-old function without a device. And to a 20-year-old, that's not innovative. That's a necessary part of living, right? And so when we think about what are things that are innovative and how to bring them in, I think bringing them in is capturing your group of people that are really excited about innovative things. And it's change management from there, right? Getting your champions, doing the education. And one of the things that we rarely talk about with change management is actually transition management, because old folks like me may not be so happy with the new change, right? And when decades ago, maybe before you, we transitioned from flow sheets that were like the size of this table to a computerized documentation system, which by today's standards is outlandish to think we ever had paper. And I was responsible, it was a Hewlett-Packard product, and I was responsible for doing the programming for the ICU because we were going to be the first place that we rolled it out. And I would get people that would say to me every day, why do we have to do this? I hate this. Why do I have to do this? And I'm like, well, we have to do it because it's going to be easier, because you're not going to need all that jazzy stuff. And well, I like all that. I can see everything at a glance. I don't have to click on anything. And then there were other people that are like, oh, this is awesome. And I would pull them in. I'd be like, okay, so when I talk about this, these options, am I missing any? And so it really is sort of tapping into the people that you know are going to be open and willing and able, and also tapping into the people who are not. So you can get their perspective and, okay, what is this not meeting for you? And how do we make that better? I mean, eventually everybody had to use it. So that was that. But it really is trying to decrease that. It's called something, friction something, right?
Yeah.
Friction uptake, whatever it's called. I don't know. That's your jam.
I'll just add to that. So I oversee improvement, and I'm going to take it off when I say this, but a frank definition is that making something better is improvement. Creating something new is innovation. But there's a Venn diagram there. So a very basic example I think of is, I used to have to paper chart too. So we're paper charting, Epic comes along, that is innovation. It's something brand new. If you were to take your paper and then, I don't know, make some way to make the paper easier to write on or whatever, that would be an improvement. You look at what's happening with pagers now, we're going to start outdated. Pagers are not going to exist anymore. We're going to move to a system, hopefully, where we don't have to use them anymore. But you're improving the way that we communicate. So I think it's important also when we think, especially in the healthcare ecosystem, are you improving something or are you really creating something novel? And the reason to make that distinction is because that's going to define the investment and the time. So if we are going to, you were asking how can we get support here? If you're going to go to your leader or whatever other area, be sure that you're thinking about the paradigm of improvement, that spectrum to innovation, because it's going to scare someone off if you say, I want to create a brand new device, a brand new product, a brand new system, and that's innovation. It doesn't mean you can't do improvement. And then the other thing I would say, and this is a other industry story, is, again, I keep talking about cross-pollination. I don't know if you're going to ask about this, but seek outside opinions. So there is this story of, I don't know if fat-free chips are really a thing anymore. It's probably like bad for you, but there used to be fat-free chips. Okay. And the story is that it was Lay's and everybody was trying to figure out how to make a fat-free chip. And so they used that Olestra, for everybody remember Olestra, and it gave everybody like diarrhea and it was really bad. So they stopped that. And they couldn't find a way to make a fat-free chip taste good and still have the texture. And nobody could figure it out. So there's this engineer and she went home and her husband was this like musician who had a sound booth in their apartment. I can't imagine that yet, but it was like really loud. So the bass is going, he's doing his thing, he's doing his music production. And like in Jurassic Park, she had her glass of wine or something and it starts to like vibrate like this with the reverberations of the bass going throughout the apartment. And it just dawned on her, what if we use sound vibration to get fat off of chips? Because what they were doing is they would put these chips on a conveyor belt with fat on them, and they would just kind of like vibrate the belt, but all the chips would crumble even though the fat was going to the bottom. So she brought this crazy idea to her supervisors and to the think tank team, and they started using sound, like booms of a sound, to shake the fat off of the potato chip, and they had a fat-free potato chip. I say that because what a random way to come up with a solution that was commercialized and, you know, had international production if she hadn't like put those two things together. So you don't always have to come up with an idea within, again, the walls of where you are. Ask someone else. That's why we brought in people who had no idea anything about healthcare to help us create, you know, diverse solutions to something. So it doesn't really answer your question, but I just had to say that because it's really important not to just stay within your focus, think outside the box.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think an analogy I heard a lot when I was still working in industry was looking at other industries to improve kind of the care experience. And one of the clients we worked with did a lot of research at like high-end hotels. Like, what was that experience of being taken care of and feeling luxury? And how could you bring that into a patient care clinic experience? There's so many different ways that we can, so many different industries we can pull inspiration from that could really change how we deliver care. We only have a few minutes left, so I want to get to questions. There's a couple online, but any in the room? They're very nice, they won't bite.
One of the challenges that we faced was actually for narrative, and they come up with tons of different ways to do that. It's different, not only hospital to hospital, sometimes even department or shift to shift. When you're working with innovators, how do you make sure that you're doing customer discovery in the service process so that you're thinking about how to scale, not just across departments, hospitals.
So great point there, because there's an indication for usage and then there's a real usage, and those are normally worlds apart. The one thing I will call out for whenever we've launched technologies that we'll say are like 20% away from the standard category is I love doing a failure modes effects analysis, which is a very nerdy sort of IHI tool, but essentially it does break down what's a way that something's going to fail and what's the probability that's going to be repeated consistently. From there, we've normally brought that back into the lab and say, should we be either recreating a technology based around these failure modes, or should we be recreating the way that we educate the process around here? Will that have negative clinical outcomes? I will say that some of the better innovations I've been a part of, I'll think back to, we made a air sling that could inflate and then be attached to an overhead lift for safe patient handling or reducing stress on a caregiver. Well, we had one group that was so adamant that they did not want to be using the air device when they're hooking up to the top of the bed, which made good sense, that they had an extra chaperone around that would actually pull the blower out of the device so it would deflate automatically. It was from there that we said, should we just have a pull cord that's on here that if this is lifted up at all, it releases the air to double check that. So it was a point that we saw the failure mode consistently deployed. There was a very smart workaround with people labor that we said, well, maybe we could just put that into our design construction and make a better technology for it. So really good point. That's a little bit of the way that we've gone throughout it.
I think I'll follow up on that. You can use customer discovery to identify unmet needs, but you can also use customer discovery as a way to understand implementation and adoption. So you can understand the workflow, the infrastructure, what's currently being used, and that can inform scaling. And it doesn't just inform like your idea, but informs how you scale and adopt it or get it adopted. So any other questions in the room? Okay, I'm glad somebody asked this because I was going to ask it. How do you find the time for research and innovation on top of your clinical responsibilities? And what kind of institutional support made research and innovation easier for you?
Sure, I'll take the research end of that. this is going to sound corny. I know, but when I was in nursing school, I was sitting in my research class and I was swearing up one wall and down the other that I would never use this ever again in my life. It's an enormous waste of my time. And I just want to get my hands on patients and take care of them and stop telling me all this stuff. So 18 months into my real life, my professional career, I'm like, oh man, and the only way to change any of this is to do research. So here we are. So it took me 18 months, but I saw the light. And it's sort of one of those things that it's about eating and sleeping and drinking. It's something that I love and make time for. And I've had opportunities to carve this stuff out. It is important that there are systems in place for people to take advantage of so that they can do this work. So we have some grants within the Department of Nursing that people can apply for to get support for time and doing research. There are lots of opportunities within the Research Institute as well. It's actually, the nursing grants are both for research, projects, and innovation. And so that provides some time. And then when people need more time, it's more of a one-on-one conversation about, all right, how are we going to make this work? Where can we beg, borrow, and steal to get you into this? And quite frankly, how much of your time are you willing to commit to doing this? And for me, it was, I don't remember a week of ever working 40 hours. You? So it's that sort of mentality. It's like, if I want to do this, I'm committing to it to make it happen. It's not part of only who I am as a professional, but who I am as a person, that this is important to me. So this is what I'm going to do. But that's not everybody, for sure. 100% not everybody. And making sure you're aware of and take advantage of those opportunities to get these little small seed grants where you can, that we have, that we can help find, I think is really important.
Great. All right, we're wrapping up. So I want to plug this and then I'll ask for kind of final thoughts. So we've talked a lot about different ways to get involved in innovation here at Lurie. Up here is kind of the synopsis of that. If you have an idea or you want to be a part of our clinician registry, obviously Lauren and Marcelo mentioned some other support systems that exist in the hospital. So please get involved, take advantage of them. And to wrap up, a final thought from each of you, like, is there something, if you had to talk to somebody who was new to this process, like what would be one piece of advice you would give them?
I would just, in the words of James Bond movie, like, never say die. So don't kill your idea. If you feel like you're getting friction, that means that you're on the right track.
Keep asking, because somebody has the answer, and I'll ask if I don't have the answer. So I would say keep asking.
Great.
Just trust your passion. It boiled up in you for a reason. Find a way to make it real.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your guys' time.